What makes an Atlantic salmon fly in freshwater? It has always been a fascinating topic as to why salmon entering freshwater rivers to spawn, respawn, will eat flies or lures when these fish are not in the river to feed. All Atlantic salmon feed largely on the nutrient-rich ocean feeding grounds near the Faroe Islands and Greenland, or en route, so what makes them eat flies or lures? My personal thoughts on this topic are varied, as there are many different types of salmon that salmon anglers have come across on Scottish rivers. The first type of salmon is most easily identified from a salmon that has recently run into the river and is still holding onto its ocean prey, or from longer resident salmon that are alert and in the right mental state to catch flies. These fish are the easiest to catch as they have not yet turned off the keen ocean hunting skills, or something has triggered them into a reactive state of mind, resulting in solid salmon fly investigations, which is always a sign that you have hooked up with one of these salmon. Once salmon settle into freshwater river environments as resident fish, they can become much harder to catch. These fish are often well educated, as they are used to seeing flies and lures from salmon fishermen on the river most days of the week. This daily onslaught can often catch them completely off guard, so different tactics are often needed to force them to react. One effective tactic for salmon like this in warmer water conditions when the salmon are deep in the pool is to fish your fly right in between them with heavy sinkers and create an erratic fly movement to separate your fly from the boring, higher than normal swinging movements of the average fisherman. This deep and erratic approach to swimming the fly will often force a trout that would otherwise be indifferent to bite. Trout will also sometimes only bite a fly when they are not interested, through a sort of territorial attack triggered by a fly swimming too close to their holding position. This behavior stems from their younger years in the river, when young trout become very territorial and stay a yard or so away from other trout. When resident trout play this game, you really need to rethink the size of your trout flies and use small sharp hooks while the trout can hook itself when it bites the fly, as you will not feel the bite, nor will the bite develop like a normal trout fly. Salmon can bite or suck a fly without the angler even knowing what has happened, and I have observed this type of behavior from my high bank observation points with my Polaroids many times over the years, where I have actually advised the angler exactly when to tighten. Trawl fishing is one of the major contributors to waste in the fishing industry. Every angler, whether sport fisher, subsistence fisher or commercial fisher, has a responsibility to shoulder their share of conservation responsibility when it comes to protecting Alaska's fisheries. When people think of fishing in Alaska, they often think of big, plentiful fish when it comes to the diversity of catchable species. While there are still some great fisheries in the great land, many old captains fondly remember the old days of big, plentiful fish, and any fish you want to call it. Some of the stories should be treated like any fish story, but there seems to be a common thread in that some of Alaska's iconic fish are definitely not as large or as abundant as they were 2 or 3 decades ago. There is data out there to support these claims of lower abundance and size. The real problem is that no one can agree on what is causing these declines, and when we do find answers, more questions seem to arise. Whenever there is a decline in Mother Nature, there is rarely a clear-cut case. There are almost always multiple factors that contribute to a population's decline, many of which are beyond human control. Regardless of where you stand on climate change, you would have to be living in a cave not to see that we are witnessing changes in climate. This is a natural process that has fluctuated back and forth since the dawn of time, and it can have a devastating effect on species that live in a narrow environmental niche. The aforementioned decline of king and chum salmon, as well as the devastating collapse of crab populations in the southern Bering Sea, have both been blamed on climate change. Is that the only factor responsible for their decline? No, but I certainly don't think it's helped their populations stabilize and maintain their current levels of interaction as humans. We have little control over what the climate cycle does or doesn't do, but we do have control over our interactions with different species. Any angler can find changes in our sustaining limits whenever there is a change in the numbers of any species we target, whether up or down. It's really impossible, but sport anglers and subsistence users are suffering today when populations of many different species are declining. The burden of conservation exists as if it always falls on the sporters whenever a species declines. While the fisherman who fishes for a pound of fish is a major contributor to the state's economy, their political contributions are unlikely to be as good as their meat. Cooking salmon, especially skin-on salmon, can be a risky business if you don't do it often enough. It's easy to overcook this juicy fish, making it tough or dry, or end up with a very unsightly skin, rather than the beautiful crispy skin salmon is so beloved for. But you can easily avoid the most common mistakes we all make when cooking salmon, and it all starts with how you slice your salmon. Don't start with the salmon skin side down for maximum crispiness. Salmon skin is where many of the healthy oils are stored, so getting it right is crucial to getting all of those benefits when you cook your skin-on salmon. So you want super crispy, flavorful skin, just like you want chicken. Start cooking salmon skin side down, and cook until golden brown, slightly browned, and crispy, then sear the salmon to finish cooking, which will make for a great eating experience. You want the temperature high enough to crisp up the skin if your fillet is skin on, but you don't want to see the white bleach that often oozes out of the meat, which isn't dangerous but is definitely not absorbent. Protein oozing out is a sign that your fish is cooking at too high a temperature, which also means you could dry it out. Keep everything on medium-low or even better, on the stovetop, then transfer to a hot oven to finish cooking in a more stable, even temperature environment. Salmon is a delicious medium-rare fish. Not overcooking can be difficult to gauge by feel or timing, so use a meat thermometer to make sure the inside of the fish is as done as you like. Just like meat, fish will have some cooked bits left over, so pull the fish out about 5 degrees before it reaches your target temperature and let it rest for 5 minutes before serving. Nothing ruins an evening like performing the Heimlich maneuver. Restoration fish, depending on the cut you choose, can have small pin bones embedded in the flesh that can be dangerous. Luckily, they are fairly easy to remove with tweezers or needle nose pliers, and are easy to find by running your hand along the flesh side of the fillet in both directions to feel for them. It's always worth taking this extra step for safety reasons, but if you don't have time to pull the fish out, at least warn your guests about the possibility of bones when you serve it. Although it's considered a lighter meal, that doesn't mean it doesn't need fat. Fat adds flavor and also helps keep the fish from getting stuck in your cooking equipment. Fish is generally very delicate and can easily open up and cook if you're not careful. Fish won't absorb much of the fat you cook it in, so use a coat of clear nail oil, either on the grill, or even on that cedar board. The fish will taste better and stay intact. Bottom trawling is a widespread industrial fishing practice that involves dragging heavy nets, large metal gates, and chains across the seabed to catch fish. Although Though previous studies have documented the direct impacts of bottom trawling on corals, sponges, fish, and other animals, until now there has been little understanding of the global impacts of the practice on the seabed. The first estimate of the amount of seabed resuspended, or stirred up, by bottom trawling suggests that the volume of sediment is approximately equal to the amount deposited on the world's continental shelves by rivers each year. Understanding the regional and global extent of resuspended sediment is essential to analyzing the environmental consequences of bottom trawling on shelf habitats and associated seafloor and open ocean ecosystems. Scientists have compared the natural causes of resuspension, waves and currents, with the resuspension caused by bottom trawling and have found new ways to observe and access the seabed to document the effects of bottom trawling. Conceptual drawing of bottom trawling from a fishing boat, showing the net and metal plate being dragged along the seabed behind a boat on the water. Bottom trawling can have very different impacts on different types of seabed sediment, such as sand, mud or silt, each with different ecological consequences. Trawling destroys natural seabed habitats by essentially plowing up the seabed. All plants and animals that live on the seabed are affected, if not completely destroyed, as their root systems or animal burrows are torn out. Resuspension of sediment on the seafloor changes the entire chemistry of the water, including nutrient levels. Resuspended sediment can reduce light levels in the water and reduce photosynthesis in marine plants, the basis of the food chain. Resuspended sediment is carried away by currents and is often lost from the local ecosystem. Sediment may be deposited elsewhere along the continental shelf or, in many cases, lost permanently from the shelf to deeper water. Changing some parts of the seafloor from soft mud to bare rock can kill organisms that live in the sediment. Species diversity and habitat complexity are directly affected when trawling changes the physical environment of sand, mud, or rock. Prepare the salmon, patting both sides of the salmon fillets lightly with paper towels, then placing them on a rimmed baking sheet. -2 pounds of salmon, we recommend 2 tablespoons of each, but you can increase or decrease depending on how much salmon you are using. Marinate for 10 to 15 minutes. Let the fish sit at room temperature for 10 to 15 minutes to remove excess moisture and